This family came to the aid of an injured deer. 1 year later, it astonished them with an unexpected gesture. When Brianna, affectionately known as Bee among her friends, heard the echoing gunshot late one night, she immediately sensed trouble looming. The ominous sound, resembling that of a rifle, raised concerns. The first red flag was that it was not hunting season, casting doubt on the shooter's intentions. Bee's family resided in close proximity to a wooded area teeming with wildlife, but hunting on their land was strictly prohibited as they never granted authorization. Moreover, the expansive surrounding lands were part of a national forest where shooting was also forbidden. This suggested that the person behind the gunshots had nefarious motives. Bee and her family had grappled with poaching issues in the past, and one of the most distressing aspects was the poachers' indifference to the animals' well-being. Bee or her husband often stumbled upon wounded animals, only to witness them fleeing in agony before they could extend a helping hand. The suffering endured by these injured creatures was heartbreaking. In response to the alarming situation, Bee's husband, Theo, resolved to venture out and investigate the area. They promptly alerted the local park rangers, seeking their assistance in apprehending the culprits and safeguarding their land. Though fraught with danger, their collective goal was to rid their property of the poachers as swiftly as possible. Bee accompanied Theo, driving their pickup while he illuminated the surroundings with a powerful light from the vehicle's rear. He had his rifle ready in case they got into trouble. They scanned the area and found new tire tracks, but no signs of the poachers. It seemed that they were long gone. They also didn't see any signs of an injured animal, so they decided to head back home. Just as they turned to go, his light picked up some eyes in the long grass. It was a baby deer. She was still very young and her mother was nowhere around. They got out to check the area and the little deer came right up to them. They walked a few steps and then they came to a big blood spot. It seemed the poachers had found a target that night, and it was probably this little deer's mother. Without touching the little fawn, they got back into the pickup and turned off all the lights. If the deer that had been shot wasn't her mother, she would come back to her baby quickly. But as the light started to break in the morning, they knew that the tiny deer was an orphan. If they left her, she would become prey to some other wild animals. So they picked her up and took her back home. In the light, they could see that she had an injured leg. She would never survive on her own. Bee had some experience hand-raising wild animals, and she set to work to get the baby fed and her injured leg cared for. They also put a small blanket around her to keep her warm. She must have been in shock, but she was content to allow the humans to help her. The local wildlife rescue had their hands full, and since Bee was a vet nurse, they were happy to leave the deer with the family to care for her. They named her Rosie and hoped that they would be able to keep her healthy until she was old enough to be released back into the wild. Rosie didn't seem to mind having all the comforts of a human house. She was kept in a small barn outside the house and was opened up during the day, but when they looked for her, she was never found outside. Somehow, the sneaky girl had figured out that all the good treats were to be found inside the kitchen of the house. Bee would come inside and find bites taken from her apples. She was cutting a carrot for dinner one day, when suddenly the little deer stood next to her on her hind legs, with her front legs on the counter, trying to sneak the carrot beside her. Rosie did not understand that she was not a dog. She happily played with the dog's toys and even got on the bed when Bee was taking a nap one day. It was clear they had a big problem on their hands. Their rescued deer was becoming completely domesticated. They took her for walks and showed her some of the foliage that she could eat. She happily ate everything they showed her, and she loved going on walks with Bee and Theo. However, she hated living in the barn. She just didn't understand why she couldn't live in the house with them. She enjoyed exercising outside and had all sorts of gadgets. She used to get her workouts done. Normally, the dog and Rosie would just hang out close to her when she was busy, but one day Rosie disappeared. When Bee checked to see where she was, all she could do was laugh. Rosie had stolen her giant exercise ball, and the deer was playing with it in the pasture next to the house. She bumped it with her head and even kicked it. She just loved that she had a ball that finally fit her size. Bee had to replace her exercise ball and make sure to put it out of reach, or the new one would get stolen too. Rosie quickly grew, and while she was still young, she was starting to look like an adult deer. She had grown a lot. She was so beautiful and graceful, and Bee and Theo adored her, but they knew that they needed to put some distance between them and the deer. They stopped allowing her to come into the house, and they didn't allow her to cuddle with them on the bed anymore. They started treating her more like a wild animal and less like a pet. They wanted to train her to become wild so that she could live a normal life out on their land. It was very sad for both of them. They had grown very attached to the animal, but they wanted to give her the best shot she had to live a normal life. Still, she didn't understand why they no longer treated her like one of the pets or why she had to stay in a pasture away from the house. It was all very strange, but she was learning what she could eat. and she seemed to acquire the skills she would need to survive on her own. After living with them for a year, Bea and Theo decided that it was time to set her free. They allowed her to roam while they watched her, but now they were going to take her to the furthest point on their land and let her go. She could live on their land or even go into the national park. They just hoped they weren't making a mistake in putting her in danger. They put her on the back of the pickup truck, and they drove her to the spot where she would be released. With heavy hearts, they gave her apple slices and then waited until she had wandered off. They got in their cars and drove off. Tears were streaming down Bea's face, and even Theo was choked up. They just hoped that their beloved Rosie would have a good life. That night, they sat in front of the television and felt blue. But by morning, something would happen that would be really surprising and would shock them both. The following morning, the family's dog signaled its desire to venture outside, prompting Bea to rise from her bed and open the door. That's when she encountered something utterly astonishing. There, on one of the porch chairs, Rosie reclined in complete relaxation, patiently awaiting their emergence. It appeared Rosie had believed they had left her behind in the woods, and she had returned home on her own. Witnessing her, there was a heartwarming sight, yet the family remained determined to give her a fair chance at a wild life. They made several attempts to reintroduce Rosie to the wilderness, but each time they released her, she steadfastly returned by morning, claiming her favorite porch chair and eagerly anticipating the family's outdoor presence and the dog's companionship. Rosie had no interest in solitary life in the wild, and it became clear that she was resolute in her attachment to the only family and home she had ever known. It seemed she yearned for the best of both worlds, and the family ultimately decided to grant her that wish. Now, Rosie enjoys free reign over their expansive property. She is often spotted inside the house, attempting to pilfer snacks from their kitchen, yet she also ventures into the forest for leisurely strolls. She comes and goes as she pleases, but more often than not, she can be found lounging on the porch while her family goes about their daily routines around her. It's a splendid life for a contented deer named Rosie. I hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up and consider to share it with your loved ones. Also, subscribe and press the bell icon to never miss the update from our channel. Thank you.